In 1945, near the end of World War II, kamikaze pilot Koichi landed his plane for repairs at the Japanese base on Odo Island. The mechanics cannot find anything wrong with the engine or the fuel lines of the plane. Lead mechanic Sasaku Tachibana deduces that Shikishima is feigning technical issues to flee from his duty. The base itself is small and in the middle of nowhere and has a barely even landing surface, which means Shikishima was desperate to land there. As Shikishima sits near the water, he sees deep-sea fish on the surface. That night, Godzilla, a large dinosaur-like creature familiar to the locals, attacks the garrison. Tachibana tells Shikishima to fire at the monster from his plane. Shikishima manages to get into his plane, whose guns are pointing straight at Godzilla. Godzilla attacks the base and its soldiers and creates havoc. The small guns with the soldiers are not near enough to stop the Godzilla. Shikishima panics to see the giant, fails to shoot, and is run out of the plane. Godzilla even destroys the plane and Shikishima is knocked unconscious. When Shikishima awakes the following day, he finds that all the soldiers are dead and Tachibana is the only other survivor, who is furious at him for failing to act. Then they both leave the island in a boat with soldiers returning from the war. Koichi returns to his town, which is destroyed due to the airplane raid. A woman named Sumiko recognized him and called him a coward because he left the war. Koichi asks her about his parents and she tells him everyone is dead. Koichi is sitting in the market when a woman gives him a little girl and runs away. She is a thief and he starts to leave with the baby after waiting for some time. The girl stops him, takes her baby, and then she goes home with him. Koichi doesn't want her to live with him and the girl named Noriko tells him that her parents are dead and the baby is not her. The next morning, Sumiko asks him why the girl and the baby are living with him. Koichi tells her about the situation and Sumiko then feeds the baby and gives them some food. 1946, Koichi and Noriko are now living together as a couple including the baby. Koichi tells her that I got a job where we have to remove sea mines, which is both money and risk. Noriko stops him from going there but he tells her that this job will allow the three of us to have a good life. Koichi goes to the job and meets Noda, Captain Akitsu, and Mizushima. Koichi gets upset seeing the boat and Noda tells him that we use the wooden boat to defuse the magnetic mines as the metal boats gets blasted when it lands on the mine. They start to pull up the mines and when the mine comes up at the surface, Akitsu fires to destroy it but misses. Koichi tries and destroy the mine, but he tells them he was in the war but didn't fight. Mizushima says that if the war had not ended yet, I would have fought too, to which Koichi gets angry. Koichi hears the people screaming and sees Godzilla, he screams and wakes up but it was a bad dream. Koichi continues to work on the same thug boat and collects money to rebuild his house and now Akiko has grown up. He calls his thug boat friends at dinner and Noda calls Noriko Koichi's wife. Koichi explains to them that she is not my wife, her parents are dead and I let her stay here. Noriko brought the baby but they are not related to each other and the baby is an orphan. Akiko calls Koichi father and he tells her I'm not your father. Listening to this, Noda says now you have a new family so you have to be with them. 1947, Koichi returns home and sees Noriko is wearing an office dress. Noriko tells him that I got a job in Ginza and Koichi tells her that my work makes enough money so you don't need to take a job. She says I can't stay with you all my life now and Koichi gets sad hearing this. The year is 1947 when many US Navy ships are destroyed at sea and they discover that it is the work of a sea creature. That creature is now heading for the Japanese port of Kanto. Koichi and his friends confront the destroyed boat and Koichi tells them it's done by Godzilla but Captain Akitsu doesn't believe this. Koichi tells them when he was at Odo Island they were attacked by Godzilla that night and no one was able to survive except him the mechanic Tachibana. Mizushima says they deliberately sent us here and Nato tells her that America has sent a warship to Japan and we have to stay here till it comes. Koichi sees dead fish on the sea surface and tells them last time when Godzilla attacked us, the scene was similar. Koichi warns them and suddenly Godzilla rises beneath the surface. They quickly start to leave and Godzilla starts chasing them. They throw a mine into the water and blast it, but Godzilla doesn't care. Kiyaki fires with the machine gun, but it doesn't matter to Godzilla either. Nato and Mizushima put another mine in its mouth to detonate it, but the mine diffuses into Godzilla's mouth. Koichi fires at the mine which blasts into Godzilla's mouth, causing significant damage, but it quickly regenerates. Before Godzilla attacks them, an Imperial Japanese Navy warship attacks Godzilla. Godzilla is wounded and then attacks the warship, the crew panics and a missile knocks Godzilla down. They think Godzilla is dead, but then the monster unleashes its heat ray, destroys the entire ship, and leaves. Koichi regains consciousness in the hospital and asks his colleagues about Godzilla. Nato tells him that he disappeared. Koichi says we have to evacuate Tokyo and they tell him that the government has not given any update on this yet. Koichi returns home and seeing his situation, Noriko asks him about the matter. He remains quiet, and when she insists, he tells her, "When I was a pilot and escaped to Oto Island. On the island, we were attacked by a giant creature named Godzilla which killed the whole crew." Koichi thinks he is dead and cries, and tells her they are again attacked by it, but Noriko calms him. Days later, a Navy ship patrolling Tokyo Bay, where they see Godzilla. Godzilla cruises the mines and heads towards the city of Ginza. Now Koichi hears the news of the evacuation of the city, and on the other hand, we see Noriko on the train in Ginza. A stampede breaks out in the city and Godzilla starts wreaking havoc on the city. Noriko sees it in front of her, and then Godzilla pulls up the whole train. Noriko jumps into the water to save her life. Some news reporters are recording Godzilla's chaos, and its foot crushes the building, causing them to fall. Godzilla moves ahead, crushing people, and Koichi reaches to save Noriko. They attack it with tanks, which enraged Godzilla launches its heat ray. A huge blast occurs which destroys half of the city, and Noriko pushes Koichi to safety but is caught in the blast and presumed dead. The blast kills tens of thousands of people, and devastated by the loss, Koichi vows revenge. 30,000 people were killed in the attack. 20,000 homes and buildings were destroyed. Koichi arrives at his house where Nato, Aketsu, and Mizushima come to him. Akiko thinks of Noriko as her mother and starts crying not seeing her. The army calls back all of its ex-soldiers, and Captain Hata tells them that we have to kill this beast ourselves because the Soviet Union and the United States have refused to help us. Hearing this, everyone gets angry because they know that Godzilla cannot be killed with a few airplanes and weapons. Frustrated, former naval engineer Noda devises a plan to destroy Godzilla by luring it out to Sagami Bay, surrounding it with Freon tanks and rupturing them, lowering the water's buoyancy and sinking it, letting the resultant water pressure crush it. Should the plan fail, balloons will be inflated under Godzilla to force it back up, killing it through explosive decompression. This is a citizen-led effort, as the Japanese armed force do not exist, and the US will not support Japan, due to its continued Cold War with Russia. To enact his plan, Noda has recruited Navy veterans to crew disarmed IJN destroyers, which were planned to be given away to the UN. Shikishima recruits Tachibana to repair a broken-down Kyushu J-7W Shinden fighter. The Shinden is a prototype that was never deployed in the war but is the most maneuverable plane in Japan. Tachibana was required as the plane was rusting in a hangar and needed a crack mechanic to make it airworthy. Tachibana loads the plane with 2 bombs and a machine gun. Koichi plans to kill Godzilla in a suicide attack by flying into its mouth and detonating explosive charges on board. Koichi leaves Akiko in the care of his neighbor Sumiko before Godzilla resurfaces. Noda gets reports of Godzilla's movements towards Tokyo and calculates that Godzilla will reach Sagami Bay by 11 a.m. the following day. Koichi attacks with his plane and lures Godzilla to the trap set by 2 destroyers. Sumiko receives a telegram intended for Koichi. Godzilla survives the initial plunge and then breaks free before being forced back up, sustaining serious injuries from the resultant decompression-induced barotrauma. With the help of a fleet of tugboats organized by Mizushima, another crewmate from the Minesweeper, the ships haul Godzilla to the surface. Enraged, Godzilla prepares to destroy all the vessels with its heat ray, but Koichi crashes the plane into Godzilla's mouth and destroys its head, causing the energy of the heat ray to tear its body apart. The crew celebrates as Koichi ejects before the explosion and parachutes to safety, using an ejection seat that Tachibana installed in the Shinden, imploring him to let go of his guilt and continue living. Upon returning home, Sumiko gives Koichi the telegram, which leads him to a hospital where he reunites with Noriko, who survived the destruction but has a black bruise creeping up her neck. Meanwhile, a chunk of Godzilla's flesh begins to regenerate as it sinks into the ocean. Thanks for watching, and make sure to press the subscribe button for more amazing videos.